Hello everyone, and welcome back to the time of Red. Yes, that is right, I finally got my Cyberpunk Red core rulebook. So it is now time to redo the tutorial videos. If you've seen before, I've done videos on the Jumpstart kit that was released before the core rulebook. I had much shorter hair there and it wasn't blue, but something I wanted to touch on very quickly before we get into this is I had a few people asking, is the core rulebook a replacement for the Jumpstart kit? Like, do we need to get the Jumpstart kit, or should you get the Jumpstart kit? Is it useful anymore, or anything like that? And I would say there still is a place for the Jumpstart kit. As you can see here, this is a character sheet from the core rulebook. And if you've seen the other videos on the Jumpstart kit, you'll know that this looks much more complicated. There's so much more here. So I think the Jumpstart kit is still potentially useful for people who are new to tabletop RPGs, or even just new to Cyberpunk Red in general, because it's a much easier entry. It's not, you're not getting bombarded with this massive spreadsheet of information. It's a lot of a more condensed way of playing. So I'll definitely still be using the Jumpstart rules if I'm running Cyberpunk Red at a convention or something for one-shots, things like that, because it's just easier for people to get to grips with. So I think there's definitely still a place for it. Now, that out of the way, let's get stuck into this. I'm going to be doing, much like I did with the Jumpstart kit, a whole load of videos on essentially going through the process of creating a character and then going into the likes of combat mechanics, ability rolls, all that good stuff. Some of the stuff is similar from the Jumpstart kit, some of it has changed, so I'm just going to go through and do all of it again, basically. But the first few videos are going to be solely around character creation, because in the Jumpstart kit you didn't really make a character. In this you can, and that's what we're going to do. This video, first off, is going to be just stepping through the character sheet and explaining the different aspects of it. I won't be going into great detail on some of them because it'll get covered as and when we come to them in the actual character creation, as to what they are or how you get these values and things like that. So with that out of the way, let's get stuck in. Okay, so starting on the top left, this little box here, this PDF actually can be got from Cyberpunk Red website. I'll put a link to it in the description. It's really handy because it's an editable PDF, so you can type into it, and it's also got a few macros in there, so that like for example, if I press 1 into intelligence here, you'll see that a lot of the stats then auto-populated, which is quite nice and makes things a bit easier. So I will put a link to that in the description. And the first macro that you can see here is if I click here, you probably won't be able to see it, but there is a pop-up box that is asking me to upload an image. In here is where you can put an image or a drawing of your character, if you choose. Next here is the handle, so what do you want them to be called? Role, so if you may know, if you're familiar with Cyberpunk, there are several roles that you can pick: rocker boy, tech, solo, all that good stuff. In here is where you say what that role is. The role ability, each role has a unique ability that they can use and only they can use. In there you can state what it is, and in the notes you can put in information about that ability, what it does. Your humanity, which is blank out of blank. Your humanity is a specific value that decreases depending on some variables. Most commonly it's going to go down because of cyberware. If it gets low or gets to 0, it can have some effects. Specifically, if it gets to 0, you can go into a state called cyberpsychosis, which is bad. Down here you can see these are the stats. If anyone is familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, and I would assume most of you probably are, this may look familiar, and there are comparisons between the two. First one here is intelligence. Self-explanatory. It's how intelligent you are. And you can see here in the skills, you might see that beside most of them there is a little thing in brackets that says int or dex or will or what have you, and those basically tell you what is the overarching stat that applies to that skill, and that's important, and we'll get to that whenever we get to skill checks. The next one down here you can see is reflexes, basically how quick you are with reactions, so quick drawing a pistol or driving a car, someone swerves out in front of you, how quick you are to pull out of the way and avoid the accident. That's your reflexes. Your dexterity, if you're familiar with D&D, this might be where it's jarring for you because you might combine reflexes and dexterity into one. In Cyberpunk it's more split out. Your dexterity is very much a physical skill, it's how bendy you are if you think of like athletics, or in fact in here there is a skill called contortionist which applies to your dexterity, so it's more of a physical skill, whereas reflexes is more of reaction, like quick instant thinking. That's muscle memory type of a skill. Here is tech. It does not stand for technology, it stands for technique. So this is your ability to do specialized tasks. So if you see here on the right hand side we have a nice list of technique skills, and that's air vehicle tech, basic tech, cyber tech, demolitions, first aid, forgery, paramedic, photography and films, pick locks, paint, draw, sculpt, whatever. And that is your technical ability, so your ability to do those kinds of things. Your cool is a social skill, effectively. It's how good you are at talking to people, persuading them. Your streetwise, things like that. It's very much a social interaction type skill. Again, I apologise for drawing on D&D a lot here, but it's a lot like your charisma score, effectively. I will be doing some comparisons to D&D, especially when it comes to stats, just because it's what a lot of people know. It is the gateway tabletop RPG. Your willpower, self-explanatory. It's your will. So I think a good example here, let me see, is concentration. So you use your willpower for that. Your endurance and resist torture and drugs. Your willpower is also linked to your hit points, but we'll get to that whenever we get to calculating hit points. Your luck. Luck is very much a utility stat. It can be used to help with rolls. So whenever you roll, you're doing an ability check. Say you're trying to disable an alarm system and you really want to make sure that you get this roll right. You want to succeed at this. You can spend luck points, which is why it's split down into blank out of blank. Move. That's your movement. Simple as that. Your body is your strength. Effectively, are you a big, muscly, brawny, bare-knuckle fist fighter? You're probably going to have a few points into body. Body is also linked to your hit points. Empathy is linked to your humanity, and it's how human you are. So the likes of your, there's a social skill here, conversation and human perception. It's linked to your empathy. It's basically how empathetic you are, but it is also linked to your humanity and decreases if you have a lot of cyberware, or other things can reduce it as well. But the most common one, as I said, is cyberware. Down near the bottom here, on the bottom left, we've got hit points. Self-explanatory, how many hit points you've got. Seriously wounded, so once you reach half your hit points, you then become seriously wounded and you start suffering penalties to rolls and attacks and things like that, because you've been shot a few times, you're bleeding out, you're not in a good state. Your death save, that is a value that is your body. So whatever you say, I have a body of 7, my death save will also be 7, and that is the number that you need to roll under using a d10 in order to not die if you run out of hit points. I'll cover that in more detail when we get to the combat section. Critical injuries, again, that's another topic. I'll cover that when we get to combat, but that is where you list what injuries you have and any addictions. Okay, weapons and armor. Your weapons and armor here are broken down into 3 categories. You've got head, body, and shield. Now, a shield is not a sci-fi shields up type thing. It's like a riot shield, and it works a little bit differently than your head and body armor. So in here you'll fill out, what have you got as head armor? Have you got leather armor? Have you got flakjack? Whatever it is. The SP is effectively the protection that it grants you, and penalty is any penalties to wearing the armour. So if you're wearing heavy armour, you're going to have restricted movement. You can see here at the bottom, penalty applies to reflexes, dex and move. If you're wearing really heavy armour, that'll get decreased depending on how heavy the armour is. The shield it works a little bit differently to head and body armour. I'll cover that whenever I get to the combat section, but it's effectively going to be a riot shield of some shape or form. Weapons, whatever weapons you may have, the damage, so the damage dice that it does. So if, say, I have a heavy pistol, it's 2d6, that's what I roll for it. Ammo, this is the current ammo that you've got in it, so much, have you got a magazine of 10, have you got a magazine of 20, what's in it. Rate of fire, which is basically how many times can you fire per action. So for a heavy pistol, you can fire twice. So in one turn, you can take 2 shots at people and roll the damage dice. And notes if the weapon has any special characteristics. If it can do automatic fire, if it has an underslung grenade launcher that you can blow someone up with, any details like that, you put that in the notes section. And the next big one here is your skills. This is your main bit that you're probably going to be looking at whenever someone asks you, or your GM asks you to make an ability check or a skill check. You're going to be running against this table. I'm not going to go through each of the skills individually because, as you can see, there are a ton of them. So most of them are fairly self-explanatory. You can see you've got 3 columns here: level, stat and base. Your base, as you can see, is 0 across all of them. And that will be the same unless you have something boosting that skill. So that could be the likes of, if you've got Cyber Eyes and they're giving you a plus to perception, your base is where you're going to put that in because it's base level. It's just augmented by something else. Your stat is related to your stats over here, the intelligence, reflex, dex, whatever. As I showed before, if I put a value in here, you can see that the stat has been automatically populated in there for the relevant skills. And the level is the level that you have in that particular skill. So whenever you go through character creation, you you get certain skills and you can add levels to them and make so that your character is better at certain things. And also, as you level up, as you gain improvement points, you can then level up these skills as well. Only thing to note, and I'll cover this, I'll point this out whenever we're doing character creation, but you can see some of the skills have a ×2 beside them. That is because they are more difficult to learn, and as such they cost double the points to improve or learn in the first place. So that's an important point. And you can see here some of these are blank. So under languages, you've got street slang, which is the common language everyone speaks, and then there's 2 blank slots, and that's basically because there are a lot of different variations that you may know that you can then put in there. So English, Spanish, French, Russian, whatever it may be, it can be added in there, and your language is got from your background, so where you're from. Same down here, play instrument, you can put in whichever specific instrument that your character can play in there. Okay, next page. This is the first thing that we'll be going to be covering whenever we go through to make a character, and it's your life path. And it is mostly fluff text. It's for role-playing purposes, really. It's sort of, your character's background and things like that. You can roll them, as you'll see whenever we get to actually doing this, which is what I'll be doing, or you can fill them out yourself. It depends. Some GMs might specify that you have to do it one way or the other. Ultimately, it's just some flavour text about your character, and we'll cover all these whenever we get to putting them in the next video. Up at the top here, aliases. Self-explanatory. What aliases, what other names do you go by? Improvement points, that's essentially your level up. Whenever you finish a session, whenever you finish a job, your GM will award you some improvement points that you can then spend on things. Reputation, again, this is done at the GM's discretion usually, and it's basically if you do something really fucking cool or really bad, you can get reputation for it. People can find out that something happened, and that can then increase or decrease your reputation in an area. And then reputation events, so you can actually specify what happened to cause that. Gear, this is generic gear. If you've got an agent, if you've got some kibble on you, anything like that, generic gear goes here. Ammunition, self-explanatory, and cash, how many eddies you've got. Fashion again, flavor text, if you got any additional fashion items, things like that. Housing is an important one. Most people will start in, or what is known as a rented cargo container, which is like you're not homeless, but you're not far off it. Unless you're an executive. If you're an exec, you'll have different housing, and that's specified under the role. How much rent you pay per month, and whenever you start the game, usually your first month is paid, but your GM may specify otherwise. And your lifestyle. Are you poor, rich, indifferent? Are you a nomad? Do you roam? What's your lifestyle? Role-specific life path. This is another segue off the life path, which is specific to your role. So a rocker boy's going to have a significantly different life to a netrunner, generally speaking. So there is another table you roll against whenever you're making, if you choose to roll your life path, that's specific for your role. So if you're a tech, you'll roll against the tech table. And wrapping up quite nicely, the last page, the most important one, and the one that we all play Cyberpunk for, Cyberware. All your augments, all your replaced limbs, everything gets recorded here, and you basically write down what it does. So the fillable PDF is quite nice because it has nice tick boxes that you can say, okay, I've got the Cyber Audio Suite, or I've got a Cyber Eye, I've got 2 Cyber Eyes, whatever it may be, and then you can put in additional information of what augments you have on there. So you need, if you have rippers, you're going to need to have a cyber arm, and then you can put in there that you've got rippers, and in the data section you can put in any additional information about that. So you can use the rippers to have a melee weapon that you can pull out, or whatever information about the cybernetic, you can put that in there. And that's it for the character sheet. So in the next video we're going to start filling this boy out and start making a character. See you then.